The 328th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down 1. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys here tonight on another live edition of the show. And we get to recap Carolina's impressive 93-84 win at home over Duke. As Carolina responds from the early week loss this week to Georgia Tech to win the biggest game they've won so far of the season. And, you know, the intro that you saw there ended with a couple Duke highlights. We may have some updated Duke highlights to put in the intro after tonight's performance with the way that Armando Bacot and Harrison Ingram and some of those guys play. You know, we're going to treat this like we do every game recap. We'll take a look at the box score. You're going to hear from Hubert Davis. You're going to hear from Armando Bacot, stat of the game, and so much more. But we are going to just get right into this thing. You know, just a big-time win for Carolina, you know, in a game that, if we're being honest, Carolina controlled from the opening tip. I mean, Duke scored the first bucket of the game. They led for 16 seconds, and that's all that Duke would lead for all night. You know, I thought going in this was going to be a prototypical Duke-Carolina game because I do think those two teams are very evenly matched. I think they're the two best teams in the conference. I think they're two teams that are capable of getting to a Final Four and getting to a national championship. And let's go ahead and say this and be honest about it. Duke's best players played really, really good. Kyle Filipowski, good. Jeremy Roach, good. Jared McCain, good. Carolina's guys, Armando, Harrison Ingram specifically, RJ Davis in the second half, they were just better. And that's what this rivalry is all about, is bringing out the best in both teams. And usually one team elevates to a different level. And tonight that was Carolina, because Armando Bacot responded in a way that I think we kind of predicted him to. I was very confident that the big fella was going to respond. And Harrison Ingram didn't look like a guy who was playing in his first ever Duke-Carolina game. I mean, you would have thought he's done this 5, 6, 7 times because he wasn't afraid of the moment, wasn't afraid to take or make big shots or make big plays. And really proud, because you never know how this game is going to go. You never know how your kids are going to respond. And for a group that even during a 10-game winning streak was being doubted, you can't doubt this team anymore after the message they sent tonight. This is the best team in the ACC, and this is a team that when they play the way they play tonight is capable of getting to a Final Four and winning a national championship.
The way they played tonight, they're the best team in the country. It's just that simple. I mean, I think this is a team that, the majority of the night, their best player was not playing the way that a lot of people thought he was going to play in this game. Now, part of that is just that you have to know the flow of the game. But, I mean, yeah, Harrison Ingram, who, it really – I'm not going to say struggled on the offensive end of the floor, but wasn't exactly the same type of player that he was to begin the season on that end of the floor. Here in these last 5 or 6 games, he has really, been a guy that's just found a way to rebound at a high level. He's scored when Carolina's needed him to score, but he hasn't necessarily been able to be a guy that's taken over games. It's been Carolina's leading scorer. We saw that a little bit early in the season. Tonight, you saw that again. And he doesn't end up leading the team in scoring, although having Armando Bacot lead the team in scoring is very helpful as well. But he was the guy that sort of paced things through the majority of this game. When Carolina needed a big shot, it was Harrison Ingram who was open and who would knock down the outside shots. And his perimeter shooting was huge for this team. It's been something that they've lacked at times this year. Really in the last couple of games where you've kind of looked and said, okay, it looks like Carolina's getting close to losing a game. And then eventually when they lost earlier in the week to Georgia Tech, it was just that shots were not falling from the outside. And in this game, you needed those shots to fall because you knew they were going to be there. And every time you needed one to drop, he was there. But Armando Bacot, I mean, it's so many people were very critical of him, especially after the other night. I mean, I saw multiple people that told me that Jalen Washington should be playing more minutes than he should at this point. And tonight was a great example of why those people simply do not know what they're talking about. Armando Bacot, the impact that he's had the entire season has been huge. But you saw it really from the get-go on both ends of the floor tonight. Yes, he got off to a great start offensively, but the way he was able to defend without fouling, alter shots early in the game really took Duke out of rhythm because if Duke, it looked like early on, I mean, Duke got some good looks inside. And if they find a way to finish through contact or just finish in general and not turn the ball over, then it probably makes for a much different game. But he did such a great job of affecting things on both ends of the floor. And it never seemed to disappear. We've seen some games this year where he started the game really well, but then the scoring touch sort of dissipates a little bit. Other guys really start to take over. They don't need him as much. This was a game where Carolina realized we can go inside to him. I thought if he had a really successful night, it would be because he got Filipowski in foul trouble. He really didn't. But the difference was that Filipowski just wasn't ready for a fight. Armando Bacot came ready to be physical, and Filipowski just could not handle that on the defensive end of the floor. He scored his points, but I thought the way that Armando Bacot played in this game was exactly what you wanted to see from him. And Carolina's big three steps up, in the end, because RJ Davis hits some huge shots down the stretch for Carolina, 2 huge second half threes, and then goes to the foul line and knocks down those foul shots for Carolina. I mean, what an outstanding game this was for this group. And yeah, if people were still questioning this group, which they probably still were because they're probably looking at Oklahoma and seeing that team fade a little bit, and they're saying, oh, how many great wins are on Carolina's resume? This is the type of win that shows you that this team is a national title contender.
Well, I mean, tonight's win means Carolina's played for the current AP top 10, and they're 2-2. With wins over Tennessee, who as of recording was, I believe, still winning on the road at Kentucky, and a win over Duke, and your losses were on a neutral court to UConn and on a neutral court to Kentucky. And I think especially if you play the Kentucky game today, I think Carolina beats Kentucky. Mm-hmm. I think UConn is much more up for grabs than it was, a month and a half ago or so. One thing that you got to note here is it was a 45-35 game at the half, and which was great. I thought Carolina came out and blitzed Duke. I mean, they hit him with a 13-8. I think was the score at the first media timeout, which became, I think, the second year before they got to the second media timeout, which was actually at the under 8. But this was a team that had blown back-to-back double-digit leads on the road and trailed at halftime or was tied at halftime. And in the second half, the closest Duke ever got, I think it was to 7. After Carolina built the lead by as much as 15. And now that's something we hadn't really seen them do against this type of competition since the Tennessee game, which was they controlled the game. You got to remember, the Tennessee, they were up 22 at the half, and they won by 8. So even Tennessee made a run in the second half. You go back to that win over Oklahoma, who was undefeated, number 7 at the time. It was a 5-point game with 2-3 minutes to go. And that was what you expect in this game. And there were multiple times that Duke would cut it to 8, cut it to 7. And it was like, if they got a stop and got a bucket, you had to settle in, and we were going to have a prototypical Carolina Duke finish. But for whatever reason, Carolina did not let that happen. And it seemed like every single time the game got to that position, Bacot, Ingram, or RJ Davis stepped up and made a play.
Cormac Ryan too. Cormac made the mistake where he turned the ball over. That was a great opportunity for Duke, and he steps up and makes a play on the defensive end. So he deserves a lot of credit for what he did on that end of the floor.
Really competed his tail off. And then that sequence where Carolina had to get up a shot because they were deep in the shot clock. Ingram just does what he's done pretty much since the Oklahoma game, which is bust his butt, get on the floor for a loose ball, has the presence of mind to throw it back to Elliot Cadeau. The ball gets swung into the corner for a Duke 3, or Cormac 3. A Duke would make the game closer again. But to me, that felt like that was the nail in the coffin, because you have this wild sequence where Duke should have, Duke had an initial stop. You go down and get a bucket. It felt like game on. Cormac standing wide open in the 3 or in the corner, and he drills the 3. So it just felt like every single time Carolina had to make a play, they made a play, which was the story of the winning streak, something that they didn't do the other night, but they got back to that in a big way this evening. The win improves them to 18-4 overall. 10-1 in league play. They now maintain a 2.5 game lead over Duke with 9 games left on Carolina's ACC schedule. We talked about it going in that, Hubert Davis has coached Carolina to arguably the 2 biggest wins in the history of the rivalry. The win at Cameron to end Coach K's regular season, and the win over them in the Final Four to end Coach K's postseason and his career. Tonight was his first home win over Duke. And look, we know Hube, he's going to downplay it. It's a big deal because you don't want to be 0-3 at home against your rival. Not that I think he was coaching with any extra sense of urgency, but I think you could tell by the way that he was into the game. It meant a lot to him was to get this win, because we have to give the crowd a ton of credit. We know this is the best crowd when this game happens every year. But you go to game day this morning, absolutely as packed as a game day crowd as you can get. And then for a 6:30 tip, I mean, you even mentioned this while we were hanging out. Just a bunch of people on Twitter just talking about the energy, the vibe, the buzz that was on campus. And that's what this game creates. We've been there, on senior night for a big game, but not even then was it being tweeted about like the way it was tonight. And then they get into the game broadcast. You could barely hear Jay Billis and Dan Schulman. And if it was as loud as it was over, the television screen, you could imagine how loud it was in the arena. So hats off to them. I mean, as great a home court advantage as they could provide.
Well, remember the one moment they literally could not hear a whistle go off after a foul. Like, when was the last time we've seen something like that in the Smith Center? It's been a long time. So yeah, they brought it. The environment was there all day. And I mean, look, that's the thing, is that everybody always wants to say how Carolina's a wine and cheese crowd. It's one of those crowds that, it gets silent during a lot of portions of the game. But I mean, throughout this year, we've really noticed it. You see during a lot of games that there are people standing a lot more than in years past. There's clearly much more buzz throughout the game. And tonight, I mean, the crowd was pretty much standing the whole game. And that's how it should be. And that's how I like it inside the Smith Center, especially for a game of that caliber. This was a huge game. I know that, the way that Carolina controlled the game, some people may say, well, was this really a great installment of the rivalry? Guys, this was two teams that were ranked inside the top 7. So, yeah, it meant a lot for both sides. And, yeah, I really thought the crowd knew the moment. They stepped up to it, and they were fantastic the entire night.
Hubert Davis now evens his record against Duke. He's 3-3. Will look to move to 4-3 in March. Is 1-2 now against John Shire after Shire did sweep Carolina last year. Carolina's now won 5 of the last 8, and they extended their all-time lead in the series to a healthy 144-117 margin. We've talked about Armando Bacot and Harrison Ingram. Both of them put together double-doubles, and a lot of it very historic stuff. For Bacot, the first North Carolina player with 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists versus Duke since Joseph Forte did so back in 2001. Bacot is just the second Tar Heel and the first since Charlie Scott to compile 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists against Duke. And with them both having 20-point double-doubles, they are the first North Carolina to do so. They're the first North Carolina duo to do so against an AP-ranked team since Antoine Jamison and Vince Carter did so back in 1998. Those numbers courtesy of Brian Ives, a great stat guy, ESPN stats and info. Then, of course, Carolina basketball themselves making those numbers available. Take a look at the box score here. And what's odd is Duke actually shot better than Carolina did. Duke shot 51% from the field. They were 35 of 69. Carolina was an even 50%, 33 of 66. But here are your differences. Carolina, 9 of 24 from the three-point line for 38%. Duke was 5 of 19, 26%. Carolina was 18 of 25 from the foul line, but Duke was just 9 of 11. So Carolina made 9 more free throws than Duke did, and they attempted 14 more free throws than Duke did. Another big favor for Carolina, just 5 turnovers in the game. That led to 7 Duke points. 11 Duke turnovers led to 19 points. Carolina actually came back to win the rebounding battle, 35-34. They trailed, I think it was up till the under 8 timeout in the second half, where Duke was actually winning the battle on the backboards. Duke 27-26 on the defensive glass, but Carolina 9-7 on the offensive glass. Duke did outscore them in the second chance category, 16-14. Carolina's bench, though, 14-6. Duke got the better of Carolina in the paint, 54-36, but fast break points went Carolina's way, 16-12. Carolina 18 assists on their 33 made baskets. Duke just 8 assists on their 35 made baskets. And Carolina led for 37 minutes, 59 seconds. Duke, as I mentioned, led for just 16 seconds. Let's now transition to the quotes of the game, and we've got 2 of them for tonight. And we'll start with the head coach of the Tar Heels. That was Hubert Davis, who was asked about a meeting he had with Armando Bacot earlier in the week and how that kind of led to the performance we saw tonight from the big man.
I did. I wanted to talk to Armando this time, not just about life, but about basketball. And, it's really important for me for Armando to finish out his career the right way. And I just wanted to hear how he was feeling. And I heard those comments from him saying taking a backseat role. And I wanted to ask him, is that what you said? And I wanted to tell him, I never said that to you. That's not what we want, and that's not what we need. And it was just a really good conversation.
In the tunnel, you gave him a hug when you saw he was
I
behind
did.
him.
I did.
What did you tell him in that moment?
I told him I loved him, and I'm so proud of him. And I gave him a kiss on the cheek or on the neck. I couldn't get up to his cheek.
I'm sorry.
No, it was good. No, I'm just really, really proud of him.
Mondo's a guy that's been here 5 years, been through a lot, man. Like he's played on a team that came within a rebound of winning a national championship. Played on a team that went 14-19 and missed the would have missed the NCAA tournament, and then was on a team last year that started preseason 1 and missed the NCAA tournament. And through it all he's ever done is wanted to win. Never cared about what he did individually, and he's done a lot. He's as accomplished a player we've seen since Tyler Hansborough come through the program. But he's never cared about what he's done individually. It's always been about the team and the name on the front of the jersey, making sure that that's getting taken care of. And it's why I think I've been so defensive of him this year, is because he's what we want every Carolina basketball player to embody, is a selfless player that's going to play his butt off and give yourself a chance to win. And look, this game's a legacy game. This game is all about how you're going to be remembered. Like, yes, he's got the Final Four moments and everything like that, but we'll remember these games as well. And had he lost tonight, he would have finished his career at home against Duke 1-4. And he goes out and puts up a monster double-double. He gets the exclamation point with the dunk. And, excited for the team, excited for the program. Yes. Excited for Armando Bacot, because I've thought the criticism wasn't warranted, and I think tonight was a reminder of the player that he is and the player that he's going to be for this team as we get into bigger and bigger games down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, he looked pretty damn good for a lazy player, which was what I was basically told by multiple people on social media. It's just amazing how, again, people do not realize how big of an impact he has on this team. And tonight is one of those ones that should shut people up for a while. This dude played amazing. He's the reason, one of the main reasons that Carolina won this game, because he really was what got them off to a good start offensively. He made things easy. And, in this game, the difference I thought from the other night was that Carolina went to him. There were times the other night where Carolina could have gone to him, but for some reason they chose not to. They weren't in rhythm. Doesn't matter. That game's behind us. Probably led to this game ultimately. Tonight, there was a focus to put the ball inside to him. And, as Hubert Davis said, look, I don't want you to be the background guy. This is just different. This is an NBA-type mindset that this team has to have in terms of scoring, because you've got so many different guys that can affect the game on that end of the floor. So, yeah, there's certain nights where RJ is just going off. Okay, you're going to want the ball in RJ's hands because he's playing well. Tonight, this was one of those chances for Armando to step up, going against a guy that a lot of people probably feel like is a better big than him with the way that he's been playing the last couple of years. And Armando said, look, you're not going to come into my gym and bully me. And as you said, the amazing thing is that he wasn't worried about the fact that it was his name that, people would be talking about. It's the fact that he wanted to get a win for Carolina. He wanted to win at home. He wanted to get Hubert Davis a win. And he wanted to go out with the win. He said as much on game day this morning when him and RJ were talking to the guys on the set. He said, look, I want to go out with a win against Duke. I don't want to go out losing my final game in the Smith Center. And he said, jokingly, I think this is my final game here against them. So, yeah, I mean, for him to go out on top against them at home probably feels really good. And, yeah, it was just, again, I saw both ends of the floor to start the game. He was outstanding. If Carolina doesn't have him, if they're playing Jalen Washington more out of the gate, then I don't think Carolina's in the position that they're in. I think he did exactly what he needed to do all night against Kyle Filipowski. And, yeah, Filipowski just – he could not respond to the physicality. At one point, you could just see it just wasn't there for him. And I think Carolina did such a great job of feeding him tonight. That's something that they got to be able to do more of, especially once they get into the tournament, because I think he's going to have some matchups that he's really going to like when he gets there It's just, Carolina's got to trust them. And tonight they did that, and you see how big of a difference it makes, especially in a game of this caliber.
Well, let's hear from the big man. He met with the media after the game, and he was asked from Josh Graham of WSJS, a guy that you will hear on the podcast hopefully early next week, if this was the best game of his super senior season.
Do you think that's the best you've played this year?
Probably so, yes. I'll say it was.
What's most satisfying about your performance?
I would say that I didn't get in foul trouble. That was one of the main things I was telling my team, and I told y'all too on Thursday. I said the biggest thing really was who got in foul trouble between me and Filipowski. And I knew that would be a game changer. And I thought in the first time I did a great job on him, really just affecting him and kind of really just living with whatever shot he took.
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. I think Filipowski, did he finish with 4 fouls?
Yes.
He did. But he never really got him into like serious foul trouble when the game was in the margins. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, Bacot didn't either. And that's surprising because I think he played the first 13 minutes of the game because you had such that long stretch from that first media timeout. You blew through the under 12.
Yep.
You got and got to the under 8 mark before you got a stoppage in play. And so it was important because you had to then play Jalen Washington, but you could go back to Armando because he wasn't in foul trouble. And I thought the first 2 fouls he got called for were really cheap. But I think the one thing they did tonight better than they've done at any point in the season is adjust to the way the game is being officiated and not commit those fouls. This was a personal game for Armando because if you go back to last year when Duke won in the Smith Center to effectively keep Carolina out of the NCAA tournament, who was the guy making plays for them down the stretch? It was Kyle Filipowski. It was a freshman in that environment, knowing what was on the line for Carolina, making winning plays. And look, he played well tonight, but he didn't compete the way that Armando Bacot did. And there's no denying that Bacot had a lot of double-doubles early in the season, albeit against lesser competition. He hasn't been the guy that we've known him to be, was averaging just 6 and 6 over his last 3 games. And I do think a lot of it was him adjusting to realizing I'm not the primary option. I'm not the first guy that this team was looking to score off of. That's RJ Davis. But it's going to be built off of you getting post touches. And I thought just him reestablishing himself tonight as a force for 40 minutes was as big a reason why Carolina won the game as anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's what they need more of from him. And I thought, again, the screening game, was fantastic from him all night. He was able to free up a lot of guys with the high ball screen, really set the offense multiple times, but he did a great job of rolling to the basket. That was what you really saw. Out of the gate, I thought one of the best plays that you saw from him was him out in transition. He goes to the Euro step and, finds a way to finish despite, good job defensively by Duke. And those are the types of things that you just like to see from him. He ends up, one of the fouls that you talked about that he picks up early on was literally that one that sent it to the under, that was technically the under 12 timeout. He was just trying to take a foul there to simply slow the game down. He was absolutely exhausted. But the thing was, it was really great to see how quickly he sort of recovered from that on the bench. Last year, if he gets stuck out there for that long, who knows how long he's on the sidelines trying to recover from that. But because he's in better shape, because the stamina is there, he was able to recover pretty quickly. Defensively, I thought against Filipowski, he did some really good things. I think, you wondered, would Filipowski be able to drive by him at certain times in this game? But he showed again what we've seen from him really all year, and that is the growth that he's shown on the defensive end of the floor. You talked about, the last 3 games he was averaging 6 and 6, and I get it, But the area of the floor where he has really improved to me this year is what he does defensively. And again, tonight, I mean, it's plenty of times where they tried to get him to switch off on things. And I thought he did a really good job for the most part of staying in front of guys, even when he got into one of those switch scenarios. The other night against Georgia Tech late in the game, it was just a bad spot for him to get switched out on. But for the most part this year, he has defended those switches very, very well. And you saw that yet again tonight. I mean, how active his hands were, creating turnovers early in the game. It's a great all-around performance from him. And yeah, staying out of foul trouble was the most important thing for him because, teams have been able to get him into foul trouble. It forces Jalen Washington to have to play a lot early. Having him out there for the majority of that first half was huge for Carolina, especially with the way that he was playing on the offensive end of the floor. And if he gets into foul trouble, who knows ultimately what the game ends up looking like? Who knows if Carolina is able to build that 10-point lead that they did?
Stat of the game, I went points off of turnovers. Carolina plus 12 in that category, 19-7. It was really the difference in the game overall and in the first half. And, we saw how detrimental it was to Carolina, in their loss the other night. Tonight they respond, they take better care of the ball, they limit Duke's possessions, and they were able to compete at a much, at a much higher rate defensively than they had the last night out. Well, we've taken our first, glance through the win over Duke. You've heard from the head coach of the Tar Heels. You've heard from Armando Bacot. We've taken a look at the box score, but coming up next, more thoughts, more takeaways. But first, Anthony's got to give you a word from our partners.
Oh, I do, man. And look, this is the type of game where you want to read the recap. You want to dive in. There's going to be an article that I'm going to put up that goes even further in depth on what we saw from the veterans tonight and how huge all those performances were. And the thing is that in order to read those articles, sometimes you wonder, well, can I get rewarded for stuff like this? Well, now you can, guys. There's an app where you can do that. And look, you're listening to our show right now as well. If you're listening back on the podcast, make sure you're doing it on the Autograph app. An app co-founded by Tom Brady is redefining the fan experience by letting users earn points for the acts of fandom that they take every day, like listening to this show. The Autograph Fandom app gives you access to your favorite UNC content all in one place and offers rewards like tickets, exclusive merchandise, and more. They did this past year, guys, with the Michigan football program, and they even sent some fans to the Rose Bowl and the national championship. They're trying to do the same thing for basketball with the Carolina side of things. So if you're a big Tar Heel fan, that could be the type of rewards that you could get. You're already listening to our show, to other shows, reading the articles, but now you can earn points and get rewarded for it. Head over to the Apple App Store and search for Autograph Fandom Rewarded and download it for free. And most importantly, you need a referral code to get in. Use the referral code HEELTOUGH, all one word, HEELTOUGH. The link and code will be in our podcast description at the end of the night.
All right, let's now get back into the win over Duke. The first takeaway was the first key to the game we had, which Carolina's big three had to play at a high level, and boy did they. We've talked about what Bacot has done. We talked about the impact of Harrison Ingram and his 21 points, 13 rebounds, 8 of 12 from three, turned into a sniper from behind the three-point line, was 5 of 9 from deep. That's as well as he shot the three ball all season long. He's now made, I think it's 41 threes on the season at Carolina. His previous 2 years at Stanford, he made 36 in both. So when we said going in, hey, better players, better floor spacing, better production. And not that tonight was the first time he really warranted why Hubert Davis took his entire staff to Dallas, Texas to ensure that he transferred into Carolina as opposed to Kansas. He's done that in plenty other games and in other ways. tonight was just a reminder of how important he is and the difference maker he is for Carolina as they hope to get to a Final Four and win a national championship.
Yeah, one of the things is that recently he has sort of struggled shooting from the field. And Trevor Williams-Mark, who does a tremendous job for Inside Carolina, sort of pointed this out. And when you look back at it, he's right. Since Carolina's gotten into conference play, it just hasn't really been the same from Harrison Ingram, especially lately. He's a guy that, as I mentioned, late in games, he was hitting shots for Carolina, but we weren't seeing that scoring punch that he was packing earlier in the season where he would get into the mid-teens. He would, get into the 20s like he does tonight. And tonight, I think you knew it kind of from the early portion of the game that he was a guy that was settled in. The thing that I think most people were wondering about in this game was how would he handle being a part of the rivalry for the first time? Yeah, he's a veteran, not quite as veteran as, guys like Jalen Withers, Cormac Ryan, who transferred in. So you kind of wondered, would it take him a little bit of time to settle himself? It didn't. He was, great on the glass for the majority of the night, but his ability to space the floor in this game was huge. He just did such a great job, I think, of, every time Carolina needed him to hit a catch and shoot three, he found a way to do it. And, the way that he shot the basketball tonight, that's what you're going to need more of in the tournament, especially because Cormac Ryan, 2 of 5 tonight from beyond the arc, not bad for Cormac, but it's still not the Cormac that we thought we were going to get. So Harrison Ingram is that guy that, Carolina needs to be able to stretch the floor from that wing position. He did that so well tonight. He was a guy that, all night, whenever Carolina needed a basket up until the end of the game, when RJ Davis started pouring in some of those late shots for Carolina, he was the guy that was hitting those clutch jumpers. And he had a couple of mid-range shots as well, leaning away. Some of the toughest shots that you're going to see. But that's how you could tell that he was in rhythm the entire night. What a tremendous performance from him. And it matches up with Armando's 25 and RJ's 17. That's the thing about RJ. Throughout most of the night, I think there were some people that were kind of panicking a little bit. Why isn't RJ playing well? Look, at the time, Carolina, I'm not going to say they didn't need RJ to hit some shots. He's that important of a player. But when you have guys like Armando and Ingram playing as well as they are, it took the pressure off of RJ. And then when he needed to make 2 big threes for Carolina down the stretch, he hits them. He takes over the game at the foul line. And, that was what Carolina needed tonight. They needed those big 3 to step up and be a huge part of what they did in this game. Because, the bench is good. They had some guys that stepped up, and we're going to talk about them here in just a couple of minutes. But in order for Carolina to win games against these types of opponents, you need your 3 best players to play at their best. And you said it coming in. How many times have we really seen that from Carolina throughout the year? Well, tonight, when they desperately needed it, these guys stepped up and did it.
RJ Davis scored 4 first-half points, and Carolina was up 10.
Mm-hmm.
That speaks volumes. This team has learned how to win without big games from Armando Bacot. And in the first half, they were playing as well as they've had in any half this year, with their best player not playing at the level that we expect him to play. And don't know if you noticed this as we hung out and watched the game. When he went to the foul line to start basically putting the game away, got pretty emotional watching him at the foul line. There's no doubt that
I couldn't tell. You were screaming most of the evening, so it was hard to kind of figure out where the emotions were.
There's no denying he is my favorite player on this team. When it's all said and done, he's at least going to be my 3rd favorite Tar Heel when his career finally comes to an end. There's a love and a gratitude I have for him that, is right there in the same breath as Marcus Page, who is to this day my favorite Tar Heel. And watching this kid overcome everything he's endured to be on the biggest stage this sport has to offer and making free throws. There was just something beautiful about it. And then when Roger Ayers completely screws him and calls as god-awful a hook and hold as I've ever seen in the history of my life, and I'm seeing my point guard on the floor darn near probably concussed, and he goes to the bench and they check him out, and you see him get up and check himself back into the game. That's tough little nut personified. And I don't know what this season holds. I hope it's a ACC regular season title. I hope it's a Final Four. And I pray to God it's a national championship. But I'm comfortable going wherever that kid takes us. And I haven't said that since Marcus Page. And I haven't said that since Joel Berry. He's in that category of a leader, of a player, of a fighter. And as much as I wanted this win for the team, the program, myself as a fan, I really wanted this win for RJ Davis because I don't know if he's coming back. I will welcome him back, and I would darn near fund his NIL for him to come back for a super senior season. But to get that win at home over Duke, and he's at the one at the foul line, icing it away, for this RJ Davis fan, it was a lot of fun to watch. And as long as I've got 4 on my team, I feel pretty confident the outcome's going to go the way I want it to go.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, he's such an easy kid to root for because he plays hard no matter what. He's always played hard. Like, that's the thing we've never questioned about him. Like, even, last year when, there were questions about who really cares, who are the guys that are going to step up and try to rally this team. He was the guy that was trying to do what he's done this year before he suffers the thumb injury. And that completely changed everything. If he doesn't suffer that injury, he wills Carolina to the tournament because he's just so clutch. And you saw it again tonight, not having his best night. Part of it was that they simply just didn't need it to get into his hands because Ingram was shooting the ball so well. Armando was just dominating inside that, I think RJ saw that, hey, I don't need to be the guy that's forcing things. He did a little bit early in the game. There were some shots that, he was throwing up and we were kind of scratching our heads, but I think that's part of just what you get with RJ. He's an aggressive player, and that's the thing that we love about him because late in the game, he gets 2 looks, knocks down a huge 3, and that Carolina really needed at the time, both times. And I mean, was really the difference. And then the trust you have in him down the stretch to put the ball in his hands. But man, he is such a fun player to watch. And I'm so glad because I thought coming into this year, and I said it when we talked about him, he was the guy that was primed for that big leap. He was primed to be that take that senior leap that we've seen from so many guys. And look, yeah, I'd love to have him back next year. I want to give him a reason not to come back. I want to win a national championship because I think if he wins a national championship, he's a first-team All-American. Like, this dude, I mean, he's going to have his jersey up in the rafters. And, I mean, he's going to be pretty far up there in terms of great players to play at North Carolina, and especially amongst the fan favorites. I don't know if I'm willing to go as far as Brennan Robinson said tonight, him and Garrison Brooks. They got on an Instagram Live after the game, and he said that he believes that his number would be retired if that ends up happening. I think it's a conversation. I think it would be one that you would have to have. But, man, he is having such a special season. I know his points per game average will go down a little bit because of this, but, I mean, it really doesn't matter to me. He is putting together one of those truly special seasons. And this was a huge win that I think is part of the legacy for him that we'll remember for a long time.
Really quickly, as it is getting late into the night, but some other things we got to touch.
We still got some people hanging on here, though.
Carolina's perimeter defense was suffocating. It's weird to look at a box score and see that you gave up 84 and Duke shot 51% and you give up 54 in the paint, and Dan Schulman, Jay Billis, both raving about Carolina's defensive effort, because Duke was 5 of 19 from behind the 3-point line, which is 26%. They didn't get a 3-point attempt. I believe it was into the under 8 mark of the second half. It was definitely the under 12, because Billis highlighted it as the game was getting late and Duke needed points. Carolina just took that away from them in the second half. And we talked so much about going into the game tonight. How do you respond after Georgia Tech shot 45%? And if you watch the game, there was a lot of the same actions that you saw on Tuesday. You saw those actions again tonight. Carolina just defended it better, because they got back to defending the pick and roll the way that they have been, which is not as much as drop coverage, whether they were pinching or hedging their screens, and really just making Duke have to really work around whatever screen was being set. And it felt like every time Duke took a three, they were almost settling for it. And it wasn't something they got within the rhythm or in the flow of their offense. And to me, like, as much of that's player execution, to me, that's a big kudos to this coaching staff, getting them in a position to respond and prepared to defend at a high level in that area, because Duke was the best 3-point shooting team in the conference entering the game, and they never once looked comfortable. They never once, got into a rhythm from behind the 3-point line. And, I think that as much as anything was the reason why Carolina's defense was so in tune, because Carolina ran off of Duke's misses tonight. Like, I looked at you plenty of times and said, we haven't ran like this in 5 years. And hopefully this wasn't just the Duke game bringing it out of them. This is something that maybe they're building towards getting back to. But Duke's just never got into a rhythm from behind the 3-point line. And as much as you could say it was them missing shots, you could say that they were missing shots because of the way Carolina defended them.
Oh, yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I mean, how many different times are you going to be able to defend the 3-point line like this against good 3-point shooting teams? And it's not just going to be that the teams are having off nights. No, I thought they did a great job. And you said that, like right when we began the podcast, that all of Duke's, their best players played well. Yeah, to a certain extent, but Tyrese Proctor did not. And that's a key guy for them, because when he has scored the ball at a high level, that's when Duke's won a lot of games. And in this game, he goes 1 for 6 from the field. Carolina completely takes him away. And, the majority of the night, it was 2 guys that were guarding him. You had Cormac Ryan, who did a fantastic job on him the entire evening. And, I mean, he made, those defensive plays late in the game that we'll be talking about. But really what he was able to do against Tyrese Proctor, after Duke fans begged for him to be the guy that was guarding him, it's amazing. Like, it was just a tremendous job all around. And you also had Seth Trimble, who I think just continues to do exactly what we know that he's capable of doing, which is defend at a high level. And, he did a good job on the offensive end, driving the basket as well. That's when he's going to be most successful, getting out in transition. But the way that he played defensively for most of the evening when he was on the floor was huge for Carolina. It's exactly what they needed in this game. But the guy that was really the difference maker out there, even in the paint at times, was Harrison Ingram. I mean, he had 4 steals in this game. Cormac had 2, but I mean, Ingram was the guy that really set the pace of creating those turnovers. And to me, that was the biggest thing. Yeah, this team defended very well on the perimeter, but they created turnovers, and they were turnovers that led to high quality opportunities because of how the team ran. And it allowed Carolina to finish a lot of those turnovers. I mean, 11 turnovers, you turn it into 19 points. I mean, that is absolutely huge for Carolina. So just overall, I mean, we've said it. This team is defended at a really high level. This is the first team that scored 70 on over 70 on Carolina. Or no, I don't remember.
Second team, Georgia Tech did so on Tuesday.
There you go. So back-to-back games. But before that, I mean, Carolina had done such a great job of defending that since that Oklahoma game, they had not allowed over 70 points. Tonight was one of those games where it felt like, especially late, Carolina was willing to give them some of those shots inside if it meant that they weren't giving up the threes that would have allowed Duke back into this game. So, yeah, you need to probably focus a little bit more, before the next game on trying to stop the dribble drive penetration that allowed them to get to the paint at times tonight, especially with a guy like Jared McCain. But I think other than that, you feel pretty good about the fact that you didn't let them get to what has allowed them to win a lot of games this year, which is their shooting from the outside.
Last real takeaway before we get into tonight's discussion topic. We talk about this game, and an unsung hero always emerges. As much as this brings out the excellence in your great players, you need someone that you don't expect to play at a high level to show up and make plays. And tonight that was Seth Trimble, 10 points off the bench, 5 of 9 from the field, and all 5 makes, I'm pretty sure, came in and at the rim. Mm-hmm. And a guy that Tuesday missed a couple layups that kind of changed the way that game ended up going, missed one again tonight in a 10-point game where you thought, God, if this game goes the other way, are we looking back at this moment and thinking that's where it turned? But later in that same sequence, made a play at the rim. We talk about this game being a tournament game. That's why guard play is so important. That's why foul trouble is so important. You also see your rotation be utilized different. And Carolina, and you saw that from Hubert tonight. He just played 8 players, and only 2 guys off the bench played double-digit minutes. But even Jalen Withers impacted the game in his 10 minutes. Jalen Washington in his 4 minutes, big offensive rebound and a putback. But tonight I'm here to celebrate Seth Trimble because the way he responded after what happened the other night is why coaches coach, and it's why you believe in them. Is because they made a mistake. And what did Coach Smith always say? When you make a mistake, you address it, you learn from it, and you move on from it. And they recognized the mistake, not laying up layups off the backboard, trying to lay them up in the cylinder. It's much harder to do it. There's a reason why the backboard is there. There's a reason why they put a square on the backboard. And it makes a big difference because he can get there as much as anybody on this team can because he's so athletic. And God knows when he jumps, he can cover 25 feet if he wants to. But Carolina doesn't win this game without Seth Trimble's 10 points, without his defense on Tyrese Proctor, and then his ability at some point or at different points to facilitate, their primary and their secondary break as he led the charge for Carolina's bench, which outscored Duke's bench 14-6.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's so many different things that he can do. I mean, yeah, we mentioned what he does on the defensive end of the floor, but I thought the area where he made the biggest impact was how important he was in pushing the tempo for Carolina. That's what he does. That's when he's at his best. And that's something that, we saw from him a lot coming out of high school. It's the reason that we thought we'd see a lot more of that, from him right out of the gate at Carolina. You didn't see it a ton last year. There were times, but he's not a guy that, really attracts the ball as the primary ball handler. But tonight you saw him do so many different things with the ball in those fast break scenarios. And I mean, his ability to get to the rim and finish in those situations is amazing. And I thought that was exactly what Carolina needed tonight because tempo was going to be important. Duke is one of the slower teams in the ACC in terms of tempo. They're not a team that likes to run. Now, tonight, there were times where they did run. It was very interesting. They scored some baskets off of the transition. But I mean, you saw a commitment from Seth Trimble when he was on the floor. If there was a turnover, even off made baskets, let's get down the floor. I need to hustle, find a way to make a play at the rim. And I think, knowing that that's where his strength is at, I mean, we've seen it, early in the year. He was a guy that had sort of settled in a little bit from beyond the arc, was knocking down some shots out there. Those aren't going right now. And so he knows, look, I need to get down the floor. I need to get to the rim, and that's where I'm going to have a chance to finish. And I thought he did such a great job in helping Carolina establish the tempo throughout the night. And if he wasn't that impactful, in doing that, or as impactful as he was on Tyrese Proctor, this could certainly have been a different game. So a great performance from Seth Trimble.
Let's get into our discussion topic really quickly. Was trying to figure out where I wanted to go. We're not deep enough in the Hubert Davis era for us to do where does this win rank amongst Duke all time. It's very clearly that this is the third biggest win all time against Duke behind his first two, and rightfully so. I couldn't help but keep going back to Armando and just thinking about what tonight means for him. Hopefully this is the springboard for him reemerging as a premier big man in this conference and in the country. Because, and I think, not to belabor the point, Carolina can't achieve what we want to achieve without him. Like, they're good to beat. Yes, they're good enough to beat the Boston Colleges, the Syracuses, those types of teams without Armando being Armando. But to beat Duke, to beat the better teams that this sport has to offer, he has to be a big part of Carolina's success. And, I think it was good of Hubert Davis to remind him, I never asked you to take a back seat. That's going to happen naturally just with the emergence of a guard and the way that Carolina runs its offense, the way they play. Like, if you have a dominant guard, yes, he's going to emerge. I think he was kind of just taken aback at what Harrison Ingram just turned into once we got into ACC play, which was just a freak of nature and an animal on the glass and trying to figure out his role. Tonight's a reminder. You're not our best player. Our best player is RJ Davis. Mm-hmm. You're the most important player. And if we're going to do the types of things that you came back to do, and you want to leave the legacy that you've always talked about leaving, and he's left a pretty doggone good one as it is, but to achieve everything, and you haven't done everything because you haven't hung a banner yet, you've got to be a big reason why. And hopefully tonight was the reemergence of him as this team will look to close out an ACC regular season championship down the stretch.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting, and I believe it was Debbie Antonelli who was on with you that said, he's kind of just sort of picking and choosing his moments. Tonight really showed that when Carolina needs him, he's going to be there for Carolina. He has that ability. I think a lot of people have just thought to themselves that this is a guy that's just not ready for the moments. He's not ready to step up.
Which is just a wild thing to say when you put together 6 straight double-doubles in an NCAA tournament run.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if they get back to the NCAA tournament and they're in a position to make a run like that, I mean, do I think he's going to probably have 6 double-doubles again? Probably not. I mean, it's possible, but when you got a guy that's rebounding the way that Harrison Ingram is, I feel like the thing that sucks about the way that he played in that 21-22 season was that now everybody expects him to come out. They expect him to be a guy that averages 20 points and 16 rebounds. And guys, there's just not players that do that outside of Zach Edey in modern college basketball. And Zach Edey does it because he's huge and there's no way to actually defend him. You foul him literally every time you try to defend the man. But Armando is a guy that, every time that we seem to look and say, man, we need him to step up in this position. This was one of those games we tabbed it. And people are probably going to say, the people that are detractors of him are going to say, well, it was the Duke game. What do you expect? Of course he's going to step up in this game. But again, I've gone back and I mean, even though he's not playing great on the offensive end of the floor, people that do not realize that his impact defensively has been huge for Carolina on that end of the floor. When you talk about why Carolina has made such a huge jump in defensive efficiency, I mean, one of the main reasons is because of how he is playing on the inside. I mean, guys, look, they've done a good job of preventing players from getting to the lane, something that was such an issue for them the last couple of years. But at the same time, I mean, we've seen some teams that have been able to drive the basket pretty successfully. The difference is you got a big man in there that is protecting the rim as good as any big man has in, I mean, who knows how long for Carolina. It's felt like it's been a really, really long time. So, I mean, I think he's a guy that just proved tonight that when Carolina has games where they need him to step up, and that'll happen when they get into the ACC tournament. I mean, before that, the second game with Duke, there'll be other games probably against Virginia, the way they're playing. But especially when they get to the NCAA tournament, this is a guy that's going to be prepared to do that. People are panicking because they think, oh, we're not seeing the same Armando Bacot that we saw in that 21-22 season. But the thing is if he was playing that way, wouldn't he be taking some of the other guys out of the game that are doing so many important things for Carolina? Like, I don't understand that mindset of, man, we want Armando to be hogging the basketball all the time and just going to work because we think that he's supposed to reach a certain stat line. Go back and look at that team, guys. If he wasn't playing the way that he was playing, that team would have been nowhere near where they actually ended up. They needed him to be that great. This team, it's so much more spread out. There's other guys that have shined at moments where it's allowed Armando to not have to be the guy that's forcing things just to try to make plays. I like the way that he's playing for the most part. I just think that people are too busy reading box scores, and tonight just proved you need to trust the man a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully this is just a reminder to himself, the fan base, the ACC, and the college basketball world just how dominant of a big man he is, and that when the lights are the brightest, he'll be there to shine. Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of the podcast, guys. But before we let you go, we do encourage you, visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Full coverage of the win over Duke can be found. A recap of the game is posted on the website already. Anthony will have some thoughts on the game as well, as we will fully just break down, recap, and enjoy the win over on the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com. As for the podcast, guys, you know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up. We're there. We do encourage you to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball season. Well, with that, guys, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. Do want to thank everybody that tuned in to the live edition of the broadcast. Do want to thank Anthony for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys listening on the audio platform. And as always, go Tar Heels and go to hell, Duke.